Hi BookTube. Today I would like to just do a quick video and just show you some techniques that I use when I want to read a book quickly for the information, to answer a question that I have about a subject matter, and not have to spend too much time with the text, but I can still literally extract the information that I need from the book. Just because sometimes finding information on the internet is not as reliable as from a published book or published text. And sometimes it's actually a lot faster to read a book than to spend hours trying to glean information off of the internet. And then of course you have to try to gauge the value of that information when you look on the internet. Whereas if you have a book, you can just go through the index or table of contents, and then of course actual skimming and scanning of the text to get the information that you're looking for, whether it's for a project or just to begin exploring a new subject. And some books, of course, like philosophy, just by their nature, you cannot read them quickly. They just are not forgivable for that. So you have to take your time when you're reading philosophy. As, of course, with poetry and stuff like this. So some books you just cannot read quickly. But I always recommend, if you are really serious about getting into a subject matter, to own a dictionary that's specific for that subject matter, a paper dictionary, because later you can get into actually highlighting phrases and it becomes like a study dictionary. And I really think that one of the huge benefits of a physical book for learning is it encourages like that tactile memory, or the tactile experience helps you to recall the information a lot better. And I don't know if other people can do this, but when you read, I can remember roughly where on the page it is. Like, I don't have a photographic memory or anything crazy like that, but so because I'm reading a physical book, I can recall, oh yeah, the answer was somewhere on this page, so I can just flip on this side of the page to look for the information that I'm looking for. I can generally remember where on the page the information is, and then if you can remember if it's near the beginning or the end. I think something like that anybody can do, but it just comes with experience. But that's one reason that I really prefer paper over digital, because digital, you don't have that tactile benefit. For philosophy, if you're reading something like the history of philosophy, it's naturally a lot quicker to read it, because you're not talking about really dense ideas. You're talking more about facts and data. And going through facts and data when you're extracting information is just naturally a lot quicker than trying to grasp an abstract idea. So the history of philosophy would be a lot faster to read than an actual dense book of philosophy. But history of philosophy, it does weave in a lot of actual philosophical ideas, so it is still really slow going. But that's where it's really handy to actually own the text, because you can highlight and annotate. Just really quickly, the way that I annotate is if I put a line, a diagonal line, because it's a lot faster than lining each and every single line one by one, and it fills the page with markings. So when I do a second or third reading, it's already marked up. I can't highlight something that's extremely important. And the ones that I do go horizontal, those are really important. And the first time around, it's a really key idea, or it's just a really pretty sentence that really stands out for me, and I want to go back and I want my attention to go on these horizontal lines really quickly, so I can be like, oh yeah, that was the key point, or that's amazing, what a cool idea. So it's kind of a mixture. Also, I do the horizontal lines for like facts, like names and dates usually, because I have a lot of trouble remembering names and dates. So like 3 dialogues between Hylas and Philonas. Sorry. So like if there's like a book mentioned within a book, I'll underline it horizontally, as well as the names of a key person or character, and then the dot is just minor detail that maybe is important, probably not, but I would like to just remember where it is on the text. And I'll do a different video on annotations later. But you can see this one, Ornamentalism, How the British Saw the Empire by David Carradine. This is, I think this was a third-year university textbook. And we had to read a lot of books really quickly. So I did that extensive horizontal underlining. And then partway through this course, that's where I actually switched to the vertical, because it's just too tedious when you have too many of them. So yeah. And I think it was Imagined Communities. I want to do a whole book chat just on this one. It's by Benedict Anderson. If you ever have a chance to read this book, I highly recommend it. But this is same course, but that's where I switched to the horizontal because we had to read one of these books a week for just one class. So that's, I mean, a lot of the information I'm going to give you in this video, if you've been to university, then you definitely already do these techniques or something. So when it comes to actually extracting information, for example, dictionaries are really good to have on hand because, I mean, later, once you get into the subject, if it's a subject that you want to devote some study time to, and you actually want to really get into that discipline or that area of study, owning the dictionary that's specific for it. This one is for English literature. This one is just a general theory book. If you own the actual physical book, again, you have that tactile memory, so you can actually develop, I think you can actually learn the definition of these words better if you can physically underline them as opposed to just simply looking them up on the internet and not actually having any attachment to them. But once you get more and more into the subject, the book becomes more and more yours, and you can begin to underline key points within the definition. You could actually highlight the actual word and be like, I want to focus, I want to do a whole essay on that word, or I want to read millions of books on that one, that relate to that one word or subject within the dictionary. So I bought these two when I read the Theory of Literary Criticism, and that one that I mentioned a few times. I took a picture of the dictionary, and Anthology of Literary Theory and Criticism. It's a mouthful to say, but I did two things when I did the quick read of it, because I think it's 1,600 pages, and I read it in about a week. So that's a really fast reading. I actually did a mix of reading and skimming and scanning, and I would only read if something is interesting to me, like this Mikhail Bakhtin is interesting. This is from the introduction, and that's where I learned about formalism and Russian formalism and poetics and stuff like this. So some things actually stood out to me, so I actually read them really carefully. And the majority of it is I just highlighted the names. So this is Horace Ars Poetica. I want to read that in detail later, so that's why they're highlighted. And so I just took a picture of the table of contents, so that way I can just keep all of this extracted information for later, so that I can get into it in detail when I have more time. And I just basically, when I read this book, I had a question, and my question is, in this huge world of literature, theory, and criticism, what applies to me and what is interesting to me? And that's it. That's the only information that I tried to take out of this, is whose way of thinking and whose school of thought intrigues me and do I want to learn more about. And that's the only stuff that I wrote down, and the rest of it it's long gone and totally forgotten about. Just having them on hand when you're actually reading the text and then going at them together can really help you. The last one is the Wagner's operas, and the way that I'm approaching this is I'm not actually reading it. This one is actually getting the most skimming out of all of them, and I'm just reading the different operas, and the only information that I'm looking for is just the absolute basic bare bones, basically what you could find on Wikipedia, except getting it from a book is a more reliable source than Wikipedia. and I have absolutely no background information in opera. I know absolutely very little about classical music, especially who's who in classical music or musical theory or anything like that. So I'm coming into this subject matter with knowing absolutely nothing. So that's why I'm reading this book quickly. That's why I'm not taking my time and reading every single page really carefully, because as an introductory book, this one, it is too difficult and too specialized for me. So my question when I'm reading this one is, what are the basics of his operas? So what are the basic dates, and what are his basic inspirations and his basic writing process of it? I'm interested in the creative aspects of his operas, and that's it. So when it gets into the theory and the musical theory and things that are just simply too complicated for me to spend time on right now, I literally skip over it. I don't read it. So that's why on my Goodreads I did not mark this as read, because I'm not actually reading it. I'm only literally extracting information from it. So I just have the operas that are mentioned in here, and I'm just writing down the source of his inspiration, the date that he began composing, the date it was completed, and the date of the first performance, because and then I just wrote down just the basics of what inspired him to write this opera. Like, where did his ideas come from? So I wrote down his source information, the date when the opera was first performed, possibly some crafting dates of how long it took him to write each opera, and then some of the details about how long it took him, or any kind of stumbling blocks that he came across when he was writing his opera. I'll do a different video for how I read deeply. I did one for how I read widely, and this one is just how, this is connected to how I read widely, because this opera is a really good example of how I get into a new subject that I've never explored before. Is I just pick a book that I really am interested in, and I literally extract information from it, and then from there I can get my bearings and figure out what about that subject matter is interesting to me. And then from there, that smaller piece, that's what I'll pick up a book next, and that book will be one that I read carefully. And then these boxes is actually an app. I took a picture of the actual page because there's just too much information on the page, and I want to reference it later. So I have the notes, and then I took a photograph. So page 125, you'll see it's just too much information. So on this page we have, from this work we can see Wagner form a musical score from situations and characters. So in his Lohengrin, sorry, German people, I probably said that wrong, but so in this opera, during his writing process of this opera, that's when he developed the skill of situations and characters and his musical score with it. And then there's just too much information explaining that on this page, and also on page 126 where they go into the details of it. And I just found that really interesting, so I took a picture so I can keep the whole entire page as a reference for later. And I'll show you that app really quickly, just 1 minute. Okay, so the app that I use for when I take a picture of the page in the book it's called Scanner Pro, and you have to pay for it. It isn't expensive. It's a few dollars, maybe $5 or less, but it syncs really good if you have like an Apple product. I'm not sure how it would work with Android or anything, but it basically takes a picture, and you can have the setting as black and white so that the actual photo would look like an actual text. And then you have all the different like functions up here where you can edit and stuff like that. And I just have it saved by basically by subject matter. And I did not take a picture of the Wagner's opera yet, so I can't show you that just yet. But that's where I got my Sanskrit writing from, is I just took pictures of it, called it Sanskrit writing. The haikus for the Japanese writing and stuff. So that way I can reference the actual page anytime I want to. And then I'll show you a different video where I go into Scrivener and how I would use like the detailed notes and stuff like that. So I'll show you quite a few more videos about writing and stuff like this, or reading and stuff like this in a different video. This one is, like I said, just for how to read quickly. If you have any questions, if your techniques are the same as mine or different, just let me know. And the one last point that I wanted to mention is when I read a book, like for example, the Constance Garnett book, I went into that one with a very specific question, and I wanted to know exactly why she loves Russian literature so much. Why did she translate Russian literature? So the only information that I extracted from that book was answers for that question. And basically, in short, it's because she loved the language, and that would be why she did that. So I took a lot of pictures for it and a little bit of the who's who, but mostly I was just reading for that information. Like, I actually read it. I didn't skim it. Skimming and scanning is different than actually reading. But to read something quickly, to retain enough information to answer your question, is one part of reading. And then skimming and scanning is a completely different process. Okay, so that's all. Thanks. Bye, BookTube.